Ask them. Yeah. I'm over there.
No judgment.
Going through the downtown. and
But you want to
getting through
drink,
the
though.
gas-
There we go.
Going through neighborhoods.
Yours at least stands up.
Adding 30 minutes to my trip.
How do you,
You know, it took me through
We ready?
downtown.
That's what the iPad doesn't say that.
I know. Oh, you're not an iPad.
No, this is a Surface.
Call the meeting to order. Roll call.
Mayor Calvin,
Here.
Councilmember Fagerly, Maskey,
Here.
Schwantes,
Here.
Davis,
Here.
Alvarado,
Here.
Osmus,
Here.
Plowman,
Here.
Nelson.
Here.
8 present, 1 absent.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any proposed additions or deletions to the agenda? Seeing and hearing none, I'll accept the motion to approve.
Moved.
Motion been made and seconded. Discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. That motion does carry. Next are consent items. Ms. Thompson.
On tonight's consent agenda, we have for council's approval the city council minutes of January 22nd, city council minutes of February 4th, Willmar Municipal Utilities Board minutes of February 11th, Planning Commission minutes of February 6th, Civic Center special event liquor license permit for the Spring Home Expo, an application for appointment of Rand Middleton to the Park and Recreation Board. For council's acceptance, the Park and Recreation Board minutes of January 16th, Police Department statistics for the month of January, Fire Department statistics for the month of January, a building report for the month of January, the accounts payable January 31 through February 13th, and for council's information, Invest in Willmar Board meeting summary of January 30th, City Hall Task Force meeting summary of January 31st, and an application for appointment to the Rice Memorial Hospital Board of Anthony Ogdahl.
Council, what are your wishes?
Could I pull D and L?
D as in David and F as in Frank?
D as in David, L as in Larry.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Palmer.
Can we pull item number H, item number I, and is there a possibility that those could be gone over with the Public Works synopsis?
So move them to Public Works.
Yes, please.
Move to approve the remaining consent items.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded to approve the remaining consent items with the exception of D as in David. H and I will be moved to the Public Works agenda, and L will be pulled as well. With those exceptions, roll call.
Councilmember Maskey,
Aye.
Schwantes,
Aye.
Davis,
Aye.
Alvarado,
Aye.
Osmus,
Aye.
Plowman,
Aye.
Nelson.
Aye.
7 ayes, 0 nays.
That motion resolution passes. The reason I did a roll call on that is there was liquor involved, and liquor takes a roll call. In the past, liquor has went through a committee, so is it the intent in the future that liquor will go back through committees again like they did in the past?
Yes, we can do that.
Okay, they either went through finance
I wasn't
or,
aware of that.
yeah, they either went through finance or Public Works is where they went through before.
Okay,
So like this one here would have went through Public Works.
okay.
And then when the liquor violations came up, they went through finance.
Yes, that okay.
Okay. So, Councilmember Alvarado, the Planning Commission minutes of February 6th.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just wondering, Sarah, we talked about you've got number 6, park dedication fees. Now, is there going to be what kind of park are we talking about? Is it parking? I didn't understand it. I'm sorry.
Yep. So, Mayor, members of the council, the Planning Commission minutes submitted the staff report that was attached on the backside of that. I had made a note about park dedication fees. I made the mistake of not submitting a clean version of that to Deb for uploading, but it was simply to remind myself that Planning Commission needed to approve park dedication fees be paid prior to the plat approval. That's part of the new subdivision ordinance. So that simply means that anybody who submits a new plat is required to either pay in cash or dedicate a certain percentage of land as new developments occur throughout the city, so that we keep up with our parks and that they continue to grow kind of in ratio with how development occurs. So it's 4% for commercial or industrial plats and 7% for residential or other.
Okay, so the park is going to be a play area for the residents of that area?
Yep, and often we see the cash in lieu option taken, which I believe is what this plat will end up being as well, which means that it goes into a dedicated fund as part of the city, and then the Park and Rec Board, the Parks Department can actually use that to acquire new land, new trails, or new equipment. It can't be used for maintaining any of the current property that we have, but it can be for obtaining that new stuff, and that's all required by statute.
Okay, thank you very much.
Then item L,
Right, that was the Invest in Willmar group, and they had talked about wanting to get started on things sooner than later, and they also talked about having emails. I would hope that they could add their emails next to their name so people can reach out to them. I didn't notice it in the notes. It's just a suggestion.
correct. Mr. Holland, can you take care of that? Have Janelle do that in the morning? So what he's asking for is that if people want to contact the individuals that are serving on that their email would be available. And because that board is adopted or appointed by the council, we would then have to reach out, the public members, of course, the council and staff. Those emails could be public, but the other ones we'd probably have to ask them first. I don't know, or Mr. Scott, do you have a ruling on that?
Well, I don't know if we need a ruling on that, but I'm trying to think of, so you're asking for that to be put on our website?
Well, they mentioned that in the minutes that they wanted to try to get going, grouping up and start the process. And they talked about having emails available to reach out to them, but then they weren't in the minutes, so that didn't make sense not to have them there if they want to get together with people to set up a time to get together. How do you reach out to talk to them if they don't have it there?
Right.
Their personal email addresses are a way to contact them.
And today I didn't have time to reply back, but I did have time to preview an email from our IT department where Dave has designed a platform where you go and you check on which project you would like to comment on. And so you click that, and then below it, there's a comment box. And then that comment would be directly sent to those people that serve on that project.
Great.
So we're in the process of getting that set up.
Okay, great.
But in addition to that, I'll make a note to see if we can't list people's names and email addresses so that if people want to make individual contact is what you're also recommending.
I believe that would be beneficial,
Okay,
but check it out with them and see what they want to do.
okay.
Thank you. That's it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Do I make a motion to, I would make a motion to approve consent items D and L.
Second.
Also made and seconded to approve consent items D as in David, L as in Lincoln, which is the Planning Commission minutes of February 6th and the Invest in Willmar Board meeting summary of January 30th. Discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. That motion does carry. Next is open forum. Mr. Bobinos.
Question, is this the hearing for the
No.
small grants? Are you having a hearing for that tonight?
Yes. The small cities, is that what you're talking about, Mr.
Yeah.
Venus?
Yep,
Yes, this is the open forum which you signed up for, that you wish to
I
speak.
signed up for both. I want to know which I'm doing now.
This would be the open forum. So if you wish to speak on the small cities, that is the hearing that's coming up next.
Okay, thank you. Bob Enos. I live in town. I wanted to bring your attention to a report that I caught on the news today from a blog that goes by the name of Wall Street 24/7. I sent it all out to you. I don't know if you had much time to look at it. A little background on this group. It's a research and journalism group of trained economists out of Wall Street. It's an LLC that's been in business now for 12 years. They're regular contributors to USA Today, MSNBC, Bloomberg News, and Yahoo. So there's some credibility there. What interested me about this report today was it gave a listing of in all of the states around the country, which local or county economies in those states were shrinking at the fastest rate. The time period that was looked at was 2013 to 2015. And the researchers contended that the fastest shrinking county economy in the state of Minnesota is Candy-Ojai County. They looked at the primary indicator was gross domestic product, and I'm sure you know that basically talks about the sum total of the production of goods, services, and values by people and industry. So they compared the performance for our county to the performance for the state. During that period of time, the state saw a growth in GDP of just shy of 16%. The growth in Candy-Ojai County for the same period of time shrunk by close to 17%. It's just something that we need to be willing to talk about and to face. I talked with a couple of members of the county board today who suggested, well, that was when we had the bird flu. The Department of Agriculture reported in 2015 that there was actually a net increase in turkey production of 4% across the country. The Department of Agriculture had this problem covered with an indemnity insurance program that's funded by the Department of Agriculture. This was actually a windfall for the producers because not only did they receive compensation for the market value of the birds that were either dead or compromised, they were also given the opportunity to throw away and replace equipment. So it enabled them to take some early write-downs on equipment and tools and fund that with Department of Ag money. It's just a wake-up, friends. We need to talk about that. We just need to talk about it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next, I'll open the public hearing on the Small Cities Development Program. Ms. Swedberg.
So tonight we're going before us, Mayor, members of the council, we will be viewing the 2019 Small Cities Development Program grant final application, and I will actually pass it off to Jill to start us.
Ms. Bankston.
Okay, so just a summary of our project here and our time frame. So the City of Willmar is applying to DEED for Small Cities Development Program funding to administer, so we're getting an error here, a streetscape project and a multifamily project. In November, we submitted a preliminary proposal to DEED. In December, DEED informed the city that the proposal was competitive and invited the city to submit an application. Tonight is our public hearing and the council's consideration of the project resolutions. And the application will be submitted to DEED pending the council's approval of submitting the proposal on February 28th. And in June, DEED will announce which Minnesota cities will receive funding. So community need for the project, the downtown represents the oldest commercial area of the city and the most susceptible to slum and blight. SCDB funding will complement lighting and other beautification projects currently being planned for the downtown. A housing study determined a need for affordable rental housing in the city, built in 1971. Many of the original materials at Lakeview are nearing end of useful life. SCDP funding will complete a funding package allowing the preservation of 127 affordable housing units at Lakeview. So this is a proposed financing, including leverage sources. For small cities, we're requesting $400,000 for Streetscape, $350,000 for rehab at Lakeview. Total request is $750,000. And then you can see the leverage sources there for a variety of sources for the Streetscape project. For the rental rehab, we have requested from Minnesota Housing $350,000 for a publicly owned housing program. $240,000 will come from the HRA's HUD Capital Fund program, and nearly $1.3 million will come from HRA discretionary funds.
Ms. Bankston, if you can go back to that slide, I believe that you may be missing one of the funding sources. It says Minnesota Main Street, then it says City of Willmar. Oh, I'm sorry. The numbers are ahead of them. You're correct, I'm incorrect. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, anticipated time frame for implementation if awarded. So in April of 2019, we would do the environmental review. June 2019, funding awards announced. September of 2019, the city would adopt policies, approve a program administration contract, environmental clearance, and then October 2019 to September 2021 is the 2-year time frame. During that time, there's also a second year public hearing and final project to deed in October 2021.
I will recap the quick streetscape activity. As we saw for the pre-application, the streetscape activity will include 6 different intersections that will see the sidewalk bump outs. There will only be 1 bump out per street direction, if that makes sense. So, and sometimes you see the bump outs on 2 sides of every street. There will only be 1 on every side of the street here. In this case. So that would be 3rd, 4th, and 5th Street along Litchfield and Becker Avenue. And then we'll also look at doing some sidewalk improvements. Public Works recently compiled a list of more than 30 areas in our sidewalks that need improvement, whether it's curb or the sidewalk itself is cracked. There's trip hazards, all sorts of different categories were involved in that survey. And Willmar Main Street is currently working with a volunteer group to consider how we might approach some of the sidewalk that's currently missing by planting them this year. So we're moving forward with some of those projects.
We already kind of touched base on this, but just to repeat, so the multifamily project is for Lakeview to replace the windows. And the form of funding from small cities would be a 0% deferred loan forgivable after the project is complete. Lakeview is a public housing development constructed in '91. There's an ongoing waiting list for the building. Primary purpose of the project is to ensure the preservation and rehab of the 127 units. And then again, in addition to the small cities funds, there'd also be proposed funds from Minnesota Housing, the HRA's HUD 2019 Capital Fund Program, and HRA discretionary funding. Now this just talks about the most recent SCDP projects in the city. In 2018, the city received $1.2 million, $253,837 for 13 businesses, $286,000 for 13 homeowners, $600,000 for Hanson Apartments, and $65,340 for administration. And prior to that, in 2012, $458,587 was received for 27 homeowners in Willmar and Raymond, $29,087 for 2 rental projects above commercial buildings, $262,335 for 9 businesses, $166,681 for Highland Apartments, and $132,012 for admin. That concludes the information at this point.
So this is a public hearing. Is there any members of the public that wish to speak? State your name and if you live in the city or not.
Is it 3-minute limit, sir?
No.
Okay. I don't need much longer than that. Bob Enos, in town. In 2018, the Small Cities Development Program, according to the state's website, awarded to the city of Willmar $1.2 million. That money was for renovations for owner-occupied homes, rental properties, and commercial properties. I don't know about anyone else, but I'm not aware of where any of that money was spent. Whether maybe some of it went to the Candy Mall. I mean, I hope not, but so if a tree falls in the forest and there's no one there to hear it, did it make a noise? I have a couple of ideas I want to run by you. I know, try to suspend your disbelief where the messenger is concerned, just for a second. Because the first thing I want to talk to you about is what I think is old-fashioned word politics, which we don't have a lot of here, So suppose out of that grant, $250,000 was set aside. And suppose the city matched that $200,000 with $200,000 in tax abatements. And suppose each one of you did a little bit of a quick and dirty survey to identify 2 streets in your ward, each one of you, that are shaggy looking and long in the tooth. And then you go out and do a little contest. We're going to have a contest for homeowners, landlords, maybe not businesses, landlords who have buildings that have, say, 4 apartments or less, because we don't want this to be a windfall for big companies, don't really need it anyway. And you concentrate on those shaggy streets that get a lot of traffic, that like 12 coming into town from the east. The first impression means everything. And you could go to a homeowner, Fernando, say, look, give us an application. I don't want to see your name on it because we've got to keep this above board. And maybe we want to even have some community groups to do all the surveys, take pictures of the property. But remember, you can't put names on it. You can't identify it because, we need transparency. And what you're saying to that building owner is, if you put up $1, we'll put up $1 of tax abatement this year, and we'll put up $1 from that $200,000. And that could fund for each of you. If you took 2 streets, you could each come up with a list of 25 houses or rental properties. And we don't want to fix your roof. We don't want to fix your plumbing. We just want to help you make it look nice for people that drive by. The paint job, the windows, the steps, the sidewalk, maybe even the landscaping. I don't know. But the stuff that would create these strips that just used to look shaggy as hell, and all of a sudden they got a little spark. And for those sections that make the biggest improvements in their look, that 50 grand you have setting aside over here, that's for a lighting program. So for that section, you guys did so well. We're going to put some fancy lights up here. And maybe we'll even put up a couple of fancy signs, street signs that don't look like anybody else's sign. But this is where you get to return to ward politics, to helping the people that you were elected to represent, which is not to say that you don't want to represent the whole city. But sometimes there's nothing wrong with bringing home the bacon for the people that you live near. Yeah? That's the first thing. The second thing, and then I'll sit down. The handicap inaccessibility of the Fairgrounds has been a bee in my bonnet for a long time. I've never been able to take my brother there. I tried once, I almost killed myself. There's no accessibility there. The ADA is 30 years old. I often hear, well, you can't make it accessible, it costs too much. But nobody ever says what too much is. And it could be that landscape architects that know what they're doing could break it up into segments. So the first thing that I would love to see, and I've had some conversations with, some of you about this, is the first thing I'd like to see is just a 48-inch path that goes all the way around the perimeter and a paved parking space or a half dozen. You don't have to put up bathrooms yet. You don't have to go all fancy. But wouldn't it be great, especially after it's rained and it's muddy? no one with a wheelchair can go up there. And sometimes you'll hear, well, we'll put you in a car and we'll drive you up there. That's not what the independent living movement is all about. It's about giving people a chance to take care of themselves. And that racetrack up there, I know plenty of people that manage in the group homes that you know, their clients love to go up there. Could you think a little bit about a project like that? Maybe the county would pony up some money and match it with you, and just see what $100 grand will pay for it. Maybe it'll only pay for that loop, but it'd be a start. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
I just want to respond to your question on where the money was spent on the 2018. It hasn't been spent yet. That's the next item on the agenda, which is looking at that, and that is for the improvement for the district heat system.
No.
And so none of those dollars have been spent.
Okay. Has any of it been spent?
No.
And you have 30 months to spend it, I read. That's what the state website says.
Is that right, 30 months?
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
So
we're a little bit late on that. It took a little while to get the paperwork done, so. Yeah.
So that, and will you be able to leverage some dollars from private owners? No.
Well,
You know what I mean?
I'll
Okay.
let Ms. Bingston answer that question.
Okay. Well, I throw those two ideas on the table because I know you have other things that you want to do. And maybe they couldn't get done right away. Maybe it'd be that tail end thing a year down the road when sometimes you have lag dollars that you didn't spend and you're looking around and you like to have a project on the boards that go, oh, maybe we could get that started. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else who wishes to speak to the public comment in regards to the 2019 Small City Development Program application? Seeing and hearing none, I'll close the public hearing, bring it to the council. Council, what are your wishes?
Looking for two resolutions according to the,
Right. So the first resolution would be to approve the 2019 Small Cities Development Program Slum and Blighted Areas designation.
I'll enter that motion.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion. Councilmember Metzger.
Just in light of hearing some other ideas here, I'm curious, this process for each year started off in November of last year. Can you explain, how do we get projects on the list that are forwarded? What does that process look like? So if somebody had an idea, as we just heard, is there a process for that to get them on the list to bring forward to put into the grant? Or how does that look?
And what happens is that the HRA has been our fiscal agent in the past. And so the HRA would be contacted, and the idea would be brought up. And then, generally speaking, Ms. Bingston meets with the administrator and the mayor and talks about the project, brings it to her board hears it, and then it's brought to the council for consideration.
Okay.
I believe I have that correct, right?
Mayor.
Let me ask specifically about handicap accessibility projects. I'm curious on how that process, is that something that's appropriate to be paid for from funding like this?
Well, it would all depend upon the grant that you applied for, correct? The one that we applied for, that would not fit those parameters unless they were making the house handicap accessible, correct? Yeah.
So, Mr. Mayor, Councilman Muskie, thank you for the question. So that kind of gets into so this would affect our 2018 program. So if homeowners or businesses are wanting to make improvements and handicap accessibility is something they want to do, that is something that's allowable. So when our inspector kind of goes out and meets with that business owner or homeowner, that's something they would discuss. And if they want that in their scope of work, that's something that can get in there. It's definitely allowable.
How about the broader project of talking about doing it at a fairground where it's not a residence?
That doesn't fit the parameters of either of these grants.
Yeah, unfortunately, that Fairgrounds is owned by the county. That's not something that would fit into this funding.
I believe the fairground is owned by a private nonprofit.
Anything else from the council? Councilmember Nelson, did you have a question?
No, I just was going to ask for her to speak to what could go in this grant, so she did that. That's okay.
Anybody else? Roll call.
Councilmember Schwantes?
Aye.
Davis?
Aye.
Alvarado?
Aye.
Osmus?
Aye.
Plowman?
Aye.
Nelson?
Aye.
Maskey?
Aye.
7 ayes, 0 nays.
That resolution passes. Next is a resolution to approve the city of Willmar in support of a small cities development program project.
I'll enter that motion.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded, and the projects would be the streetscape for downtown and then the windows at the Lakeview Apartments. Additional comments from the council? Questions? Councilmember Schwantes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say a kudos to Ms. Bankston for all the work and effort that she has put into these. This is fantastic. What a great opportunity. What a way to leverage our dollars. And those things don't happen accidentally. It's a lot of work and effort, and I thank you very much for that and for everyone involved in the whole process. So thank you, including Ms. Swedberg. Thank you.
Additional questions or comments? Roll call.
Councilmember Davis?
I'm sorry, hold on. Councilmember Alvarado.
I just want to kind of echo some of that, but I appreciate like Ms. Swedberg and the team pulling all this together. I'm excited about our downtown and what's happening down there, what you're doing down there. We got a great vitality down there, so we got to continue to encourage it. So thank you for that effort. Thank you.
Additional comments or questions? Councilmember Maskey.
Just for flow of traffic, these bump outs, I know I've asked this before, safety setups on these things, particularly so cars will be clearly knowing not to drive on the bump out, correct? Well, how tall is the curb? Is this the standard size of the curb? And police department doesn't see any problem with the flow of traffic with those?
No, I believe this is very similar to what they have in downtown New London on those corners, so no traffic concerns from our perspective.
I think it's a normal D-cut curve, right?
Yeah.
Additional discussion or questions? Roll call.
Councilmember Davis?
Aye.
Alvarado?
Aye.
Osmus?
Aye.
Plowman?
Aye.
Nelson?
Aye.
Maskey?
Aye.
Schwantes?
Aye.
7 ayes, 0 nays.
That resolution passes as well. Again, I also want to echo the thanks to Ms. Swedberg and also to Ms. Bankston. Jill, when I see your phone number pop up on my phone when you call, I always know it's good news. So thank you for your willingness to invest in Willmar and make Willmar better. And these projects do not happen by accident, as council members have already stated, and your tenacity of making these happen is really appreciated. So thank you very much. Next, we have a resolution approving the 2018 Small Cities Development Program Administrative Contract. Ms. Bankston.
Okay, so final item for small cities this evening is approving the contract between the Candioi County HRA and the City of Willmar to be your administrative entity for your 2018 Small Cities Program. And again, this is the one that's just getting underway. I think there's about 14 days left for deed to review and get through the public process, and then they should be releasing money to you so we can start taking applications from our waiting list after that.
Could you tell us how many we have on the waiting list? I know you covered that last time you were here, but
Yes, so I think we have about approximately 40 homeowners and 35 businesses. And we're only anticipating 13 of each group.
correct.
So, yeah.
So the need was here.
Yeah.
And if you recall, on this particular grant, Willmar was awarded the highest award of any city in the state of Minnesota for this grant award cycle. So that goes to show the good work that Jill, Ms. Bankston did to make this happen. So thank you very much for that. So
Thank you for the compliments, but I'll also have to compliment the city of Willmar and the residents that respond to our surveys and come out to our meetings. Because without that input, you would not have competitive grant applications. So it's really important to get all that community involvement up front when we're applying for this funding.
Council, any questions, comments? Roll call.
Councilmember Alvarado.
Aye.
Osmus.
Aye.
Plowman.
Aye.
Nelson.
Aye.
Maskey.
Aye.
Schwantes.
Aye.
Davis.
Aye.
7 ayes, 0 nays.
That resolution passes as well. Thank you very much. You have a
Thank
great
you.
evening.
Yep, thank you.
Next, we have the Public Works, Public Safety Committee report. Councilmember Plowman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Public Works Public Safety Committee met Wednesday, February 6th at 5:15 PM. This was our first organizational meeting of the year. Our kind of first item of business after calling to order was the election of officers, whereas I was nominated and elected as the chair of the committee, with Councilwoman Osmus nominated and elected as vice chair of the committee. Next item was establishing our meeting dates and times, and we had established that the committee will be meeting on the Wednesdays following each council meeting at the time of 5:15 to kind of keep running concurrent with all the other committees. And we do believe, after speaking with Public Works and with other staff members and whatnot, that we should be able to accomplish everything necessary in that amount of time. What was not on the agenda for the organizational meeting was the minutes that I actually requested be pulled, items number H and items number I, and that would be the police and fire statistics. So I want to take this time to jump over to Police Chief Felt and grab a short synopsis of those statistics. Chief Felt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the council. To briefly discuss the January statistics that the Willmar Police Department turned in here is that in January 2019, we had 1,444 calls for service. That was slightly less than last year of 1,777. In looking at the numbers, that's almost entirely attributed to the same number, fewer traffic stops. We've averaged about 46 calls per day, but last month we dealt a lot more with, our staff dealt with more motorist assists, crashes, abandoned vehicles that were weather related. Those took more time, and the investigations involved in those. So that would typically result in some lesser traffic enforcement. And we also had an increase in alarms, but otherwise no other specific calls for service that are much greater or less than others.
Okay, thank you, Chief. In the future agendas, I do believe that these will be a part of the meeting, so it will be included within these minutes. And so if there are no questions regarding that from the council, jump over to Chief Hansen for the fire statistics.
Mr. Chair, members of the council, you'll see that the January fire statistics were the fire department had 28 calls, which is close to what we had last year in January, which was 33 calls. You can see that there were 9 alarm activations, 1 cooking fire, 1 building fire, 3 sprinkler activations, 4 vehicle crashes, 6 smoke scares, 1 carbon monoxide alarm, 1 elevator rescue, a gas spill, and a natural gas leak for the month.
All right, any questions regarding that information by the council? All right, seeing and hearing none, I will move on. Item number 4, and this was a resolution item, but we did discuss it. Staff brought forth for approval updating the covenant for the Robbins Island project, designating the parkland will not be developed besides items inside the scope of the park for the GMR PTC grant. I hope I got that acronym correct because I wasn't about to say it. Motion was made and seconded, and I will introduce the motion to adopt the resolution updating the declaration of restrictive covenants of public outdoor recreation use for Robbins Island.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to update the covenant for Robbins Island. Discussion. Councilmember Schwantes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have 2 questions. One, how is this different from what is in place? And the second one is, by approving this, does that mean that the community center would not be allowed to be at Robbins Island?
I will defer to Mr. Baumgartner.
Mayor, member of the councils. Basically, this is just updating what we have in place right now from 1974. What the grant wanted us to do is to make sure that it's going to stay as a park, that nothing else can basically get moved into there. So as far as your comment with the community center, I still think it's at its city land, and if they need to do it to put a community center, we still can. This is basically saying that it's going to be a park and always stay a park. We can't go to like a residential.
Councilor Maskey.
Well, I was just going to ask if, I mean, and I'm remiss that I didn't read through the entire attachment here. The Declaration of Restrictive Covenants, what are the scope of those covenants? I mean, those are put in that usually have specific restrictions. It doesn't change the designation as a park. I'm curious, do they extend, I think maybe this is a question that was also asked, is what is it, is there a restriction on buildings in areas of that park?
Mr. Scott.
Yeah, so Mayor, members of the council, these restrictive covenants, I believe, come straight out of the grant agreement that the city is going to be required to enter into with the DNR. And they do specify that the real property, meaning the park, should be managed for public outdoor recreation use. I do think that's going to create a problem if the council is hoping to put a community center facility within this restricted area. And this area, as I understand it, encompasses the whole park. So I do believe that's an issue.
Councilor Nelson.
We asked this question at the Public Works meeting also at that, and I expressed a concern about the time frame that we're under, and I don't know where we're at with this needing to be submitted, or has it already been submitted?
It hasn't been submitted.
Okay. Where are we at from a time standpoint with this?
There isn't. It was supposed to have been done when we signed off on it in December, but the DNR came back to us and asking us about the deed contract. So I'm trying to get some clarification on it to submit it back to the DNR. I've been working with Stuart on it as well. And he was fine with the verbiage of it. So if you want me to go and ask the DNR if we can build the community center on there, I can ask them that.
I'm just concerned about the time frame, and I've expressed that concern before, in that I know all the bills we need to be completely done with that grant by June of next year. So I just was asking for clarification. I know that question was asked at the meeting also, so with where we are from a time standpoint. And you indicated that Robert had been asked to, that Mr. Scott had been asked to draw this up?
Yes.
Okay.
City Attorney Scott.
Yeah, again, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I drafted this. I used the language that was right out of the grant agreement. I did not draft it trying to take into account the possibility that community center could be located at Robbins Island. I don't know if there are any opportunities to negotiate this language or try and clarify that with the DNR. But if that's a concern for the council and you want to keep that option open, and there's nothing, too pressing that you have to have this restrictive covenants in place within the next 2 weeks, my recommendation would be that you not approve this version as presented to you tonight, and allow staff to try and work with DNR, work with its consultant to see, to get an answer to this question one way or the other. And if it is permissible to build the community center and still comply with the DNR's requirements, I would definitely want to reword some of the language in this declaration.
Councilmember Plowman.
Thank you. Yeah, with that said, and with the, I'm happy that we were able to bring it to the table and get the feel for the council. I'm going to wait to comment. I'll call on Mr. Meskey.
Mr. Meskey.
I was just going to suggest this council has not talked about moving the community center to Robbins Island in an official capacity. And so putting it as an option to stop these things when we haven't even talked about that possibility officially seems a little strange to me. And so I guess if it would impede what we're doing ultimately for the project, I would be against that. I think that we've said we have a deal here that we're moving forward, and we should do so. It says it's a 4-season shelter. I don't know what that means. A community center, I suppose, would be used for 4 seasons as well, but I don't know if we're putting forth the design and so on. But I think when we have a few folks that maybe have an idea of which direction we're moving before we've properly vetted it, it seems wrong to stop the progress of the other things that we're currently doing.
Councilman Reski, I think I'm not going to speak for any of the council members, but I mean, it was talked about when we had the conversation with Engen and Associates. So has it been vetted to a full extent? No, it has not. Councilmember Schwantes, followed by Councilmember Osmus.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The reason for my question was not to say that this is a location for the community center, but I at least wanted us to have an informed decision and allow that to be an option, if knowing that that was some council members' wishes. So I think that having it explored and making a decision, knowing that one way or another is a good business practice, and that's not to say that's the final location of the community center.
Councilmember Osmus.
I was going to say pretty much the same thing that Councilwoman Schwantes just said, is that it's just been floated as a possible location. Nothing definitive has been decided, but I wouldn't want to vote on this as it's stated right now to eliminate that as a possibility. I think the plan was always, we still want to go forward with the 4-season building because that's part of the legacy grant, but the option needs to still be there if it's a possibility that that would be a location for the community center.
How we could handle this is we could, council could consider this, if you chose to, that you would amend it based on information from the city attorney or our Park and Recreation Director getting approval from the DNR. If that was something you wanted to amend and put in your motion, you can do that so that you could keep the project moving. You wouldn't have to wait the whole 2 weeks, but if council's not comfortable with that, they can certainly do whatever they wish here. So, Councilmember Meske.
I was going to suggest just that, because what you don't want to do is if you get into it too far and they tell you that is not something viable and you jeopardize the grant. And so I understand it's still some dreams of some to be moving that out there, but if it does so and jeopardizes the project, I would not forgive you for that. So I think doing it the route you're talking about, Mr. Mayor, makes a whole lot of sense.
I'd like to make that motion.
And I would introduce that in a motion.
So an amendment to the motion is being made. You want me to paraphrase it?
I do.
That the the city attorney and our Park and Rec Director contact the DNR to see if the civic or the community center could be located on the park, being a park operated or Park and Rec operated facility.
Okay, will do.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Discussion, Councilmember Nelson.
I am not comfortable because that basically is telling the DNR that that's what our plans are to do. I think a better way to say that would be ask the DNR for clarification of what that means with that. And I know we're divided on this, but it is being talked about in the community. And my first concern is over this grant and that we are behind the 8 ball with this. We have not been up to date on this information. And so if this accomplishes that, fine, but I am very concerned that we are jeopardizing this grant by some of the things that have gone on in the last while, so.
What I heard from Councilmember Meske is that he was open for an exploration. If there's a different wording, I believe you would be open to different wording.
It's just simply feasibility. And you can say that the council we haven't made a decision on this whatsoever, and we're planning to make a decision on it, and is it even feasible? And you can tell them that on the surface, I was not in support of it initially, but I would like to know if it's even possible. Go ahead.
Mr. Scott, are you?
Mr. Mayor,
I think we have 2 different things on the table, kind of.
Well, I think I'm comfortable with the motion. I think we can certainly take the direction from the council, ask the question, get clarification, If there are changes necessary to the wording after we get the answer, we can certainly make those under the direction of this motion. I don't think asking the question is going to create any more problems. That's not been my experience dealing with DNR. If they say that's simply not an option, we will inform them, okay, thank you, and we'll execute the declaration pursuant to the motion.
Are you more comfortable with that, Councilmember Nelson?
Yep, that's fine.
Councilmember Plowman?
Just a question regarding the amendment for Mr. Meskey and maybe for Attorney Scott. Is the intent that this be done expeditiously so that it can come back to the council rather than back through Public Works and then to the council?
Well, I think it would be just, if it can be done, it would be just be approved and moved on.
Even
It
better.
wouldn't come back.
Even better, okay.
That's my understanding.
That's my understanding.
Okay, well, and that, if I may, that timing is my concern. And so, yeah, as long as this isn't going to rock the boat, if it's something that we can get answers and get it going with the amendment, then okay, I'm in favor of it.
So then I think the only thing that I'm hearing here that might not have been verbalized the first time around is we don't want to do anything to jeopardize the grant.
Correct.
And we're all in agreement with that, right?
Yep.
All in favor of the amendment as amended and proposed, signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. The motion carries. Next, on the original amendment, which is to adopt the amended covenant for Robbins Island from 1971. Discussion. All in favor? Roll call.
Councilmember Osmus,
Aye.
Plowman,
Aye.
Nelson,
Aye.
Maskey,
Aye.
Schwantes,
Aye.
Davis,
Aye.
Alvarado.
Aye.
7 ayes, 0 nays.
That resolution passes. Councilmember Plowman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The next item up for discussion was the purchase of mowers. Staff brought forth for our approval or our review and approval the replacement and purchase of 4 Kubota mowers and accessories for use by Public Works Department in accordance with the 2019 vehicle replacement schedule, and it does follow that criteria. The new mowers are under the Sourcewell buying co-op pricing and accessories. They are sourced from local vendors, Hug Kubota and Dahlberg Boot and Trailer, and we did also ask questions just for the council's knowledge regarding number one, our buying power and how far our money was getting us, and also the ability to keep those dollars local. And it seems like we're accomplishing both with the Sourcewell co-op product. A motion was made and seconded, and I will enter that motion to purchase the 4 2019 Kubota mowers and accessories from Hug Kubota and Dahlberg Boot and Trailer in the amount of $62,868.52.
I'll second that.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion. Roll call.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Alvarado.
I was just going to say, we traded in some equipment, and we were able to save $20,272. So we're being prudent on that. So we're not paying the full price, and I think that's important to the public to realize that. Thank you.
Additional discussion. Roll call.
Councilmember Plowman,
Aye.
Nelson,
Aye.
Maskey,
Aye.
Schwantes,
Aye.
Davis,
Aye.
Alvarado,
Aye.
Osmus.
Aye.
7 ayes, 0 nays.
That resolution passes. Councilmember Plowman.
Thank you. The next item was a 2019 improvement report and preliminary budget, and I am going to turn the microphone over to our city engineer, Mr. Christensen.
Thank you, mayors and members of the council. Let me get to the right. Tonight is the time each year, in accordance with Chapter 429 of the Minnesota State Statute, that an improvement report is given to this body. A list of streets and other proposed projects has been to be assessed, will be presented to you tonight. And I've changed things, or we've changed things slightly this year, and the report is only dealing with the projects that are to be assessed. There are other large projects that we've talked about multiple times that are not in this report, because as of the 429 state statute reads, it's just for the assessable projects. So I've prepared this report that will explain the proposed improvements and the estimated costs. Sources of the funding for the 19 improvement projects include money from the Willmar Municipal Utilities, assessments, federal and state aid funding.
Mr. Christensen, hasn't this been in the past a public hearing?
What happens, Mr. Mayor, is that after this is given, then you schedule the public hearing.
Okay.
So there will be a public hearing, yes.
I know on the last agenda, we had something under consent on this.
Right, that was calling for this report to come back to you.
Right.
So that way you get to see it 4 or 5 or 6 times.
We're good at that.
Okay, page 104 in your packets is the beginning of the preliminary, or of the improvement report. Let's see if I can do this. There we go. Title page of the report, of course, as typical, we've got the reconstruct and the overlay projects. Reconstruction projects this year that are being proposed are 5th Street Southwest from 19th Avenue to the end of the cul-de-sac, south to the end of the cul-de-sac rather, and then the stub streets that we called them last year that we pulled from last year's projects. We increased the scope of those projects, and we actually go from the service road, or Becker Avenue as it is, to the south end of those stub streets on the southeast side of town. 3 overlay projects this year: 15th Street Southwest from Trott to Willmar. From Trott to 19th Avenue. Civic Center Drive from Business 71 to County Road 9. And then 19th Avenue Southwest from First out to County Road 5, which is a county project that we are partnering with the County Public Works Department on that one. I've kind of gone through the introduction so far, or already, with this report. This is prepared annually to discuss the street and utility improvements for the 19 construction season. Project areas are selected based on a 5-year CIP, as well as input from engineering and municipal utility commission staff. The project areas are identified in Appendix B in this report. That's got a map that'll probably be hard to read unless you zoom in on each individual area of town. Project scope consists of reconstruction areas and overlay areas, as mentioned before. The improvements in the reconstruct areas include surface improvements, ADA, sidewalk improvements, installation and replacement of water main, storm drain, sanitary sewer mains, and curb and gutter. Improvements in overlay, of course, is spot replacement of curb and gutter, sidewalk, the base material, and then it's a mill and overlay of those areas. More specifically, on a street, on a reconstruct area, the street section is removed, and then the existing bituminous is removed and allowed for utility construction. The utilities are then replaced. Surface improvements will follow, including the base concrete curb and gutter and bituminous surfacing with ADA and sidewalk improvements. All streets at this point will remain consistent with our current City of Willmar standard specifications. I don't know how much detail you want me to go into, Mr. Mayor, but I'm kind of summarizing each of these.
Up to Mr. Plowman.
Mr. Plowman,
I think you're doing all right.
Okay. Storm sewer, we add storm sewer as necessary and as per drainage calculations and things of that nature, and especially in areas that we know are problem areas in town. So we'll add or increase the size of storm sewer and catch basins as necessary. Water main, with direct communication with the municipal utility staff, is determined age of lines, type of lines. Of course, all new lines are put in plastic, Most of the older stuff that we're replacing is ductile iron, and so it's getting replaced with plastic pipe. The services on water main, of course, will be taken out to the right-of-way as new and then connected with the existing services of each property owner. Sanitary sewer, much the same. If replacement of sanitary sewer or increase of size of sanitary sewer is needed, that is taking place obviously before the street surface is put down, and then those services are put back in place to the right-of-way line and connected to existing property owners' services. Any questions on reconstruct areas? Overlay areas are much quicker construction. It's performed by doing spot replacement of some curb and gutter, some sidewalk, ADA improvements, and then we typically mill the last or the outside 10 feet of each street, and then a new pavement surface, 2-inch typically, is placed onto that street, replacing the crown in the street, in the middle of the street, and tying back into the curb and gutter that has been recently milled. Existing manholes are adjusted and valves are adjusted up to meet the new road surface. Funding, as summarized before, include local funds, federal and state aid funds, assessments to the benefiting properties, and the assessments, as a reminder, are only for street items. Utilities are not assessed. Project costs will be assessed to the benefiting property owners based on our comprehensive assessment policy. Preliminary assessment roll will be prepared and determined individual or sent to individual property assessments and owners. The city must follow the Minnesota State Statute, Chapter 429, and notify property owners and conduct public meetings on the proposed assessments. Specifically, your question, Mr. Mayor, is the next page is a schedule. Proposed schedule as of tonight, we're doing this improvement report. We will mail out the notice of the public hearing after we set the date tonight in the next day or so, and then publish those hearings and hold the public hearings by March 18th. I will present plans and specs to the council to authorize advertisement of those projects by the 1st of April. We'll advertise for bids by the second week in April, and then open bids by the first weekend, or within the first 10 days of May is the intent right at this time. At that point, we'll come back for an assessment hearing, so we'll know the exact costs, the exact assessments, and then we'll publish those hearings and mail that information out to the property owners at that time. At this time, we're planning on the assessment hearing on June 17th, and with construction to begin in July, and the intent would be to substantially complete projects by October, although that was the intent this year and every year, and that doesn't always happen. With the complete construction on some of these projects where we have to come back with the final overlay in June of 2020. Based on these findings presented in the report, and the proposed improvements are feasible from an engineering perspective. Again, as I mentioned at the committee meeting, I am not stating financial feasibility. I'm just stating engineering and design construction feasibility. Proposed improvements will benefit adjacent properties and the city of Willmar by improving existing street and utilities within the project areas. It is recommended the projects be constructed as proposed and that a public hearing be held at City Council in accordance with Chapter 429. Furthermore, it's recommended City Council approve this report and order the preparation of final plans and specifications. Further pages, the spreadsheet that you will most likely not be able to read breaks out each of the projects individually for cost and where those source of funds are coming from each of those projects. The bottom of that page gives you a summary total cost, available cash for those projects, total bond requirements, assessments, and then city obligation for the entire, or for the projects in their entirety. As promised, a location map that, again, you probably won't be able to read on your screen, that is color-coded for the different project areas in town. And I did notice when I was reviewing this earlier today that the project map itself has projects that are not included in this report because it has projects that are not being assessed. Traffic signal, pathways, and things of that nature are not in this report because they are not being assessed. And I believe after that, it's the really geeky, boring stuff about the pavement condition index of each street proposed. Mr. Plowman.
Thank you, Mr. Christensen, for that report. And I guess that you did hit on one area that brought up some conversation within the committee, but we decided it was worth passing forward and discussion at the council table regarding this being feasible from an engineering standpoint, but the financial feasibility is a separate issue altogether. We did also discuss that at finance, but that's a separate item tonight as well. But I think it would be appropriate for the council to discuss this before we make our decision, but also during discussion, keeping in mind the timetable and that these construction projects, bids and whatnot are time sensitive. Question that I have for you, if I may, in terms of the bid schedule, how it's currently scheduled out, if we are able to stick to this schedule, is this your preferred timeline of events? Does it fall into the area that engineering's happy with in terms of lessening the financial impact or getting the maximum benefit?
Councilmember Plowman, it does. It's 2 weeks shorter than I originally had scheduled, but I believe we've actually anticipated the approval of these projects. And so we've got a significant amount of design on all of these projects done already. And so I think the engineering time frame is sufficient.
Okay, thank you.
And therefore, the construction July to October, I would believe is plenty of time for construction projects.
Okay. Well, and I guess it's probably a good idea to open it up to the council because, again, we did have some discussion regarding the finances. I mean, we went over the engineering aspects of it and the feasibility of the projects getting done, the practicality of them being achieved, but also there is a financial impact, which we have to, it's our responsibility to look after that also. So questions, comments from the council? Ms. Schwantes.
Thank you, Mr. Plowman, Councilmember Plowman. I'm just wondering if the local funds that are referenced in the funding are sufficient in the budget to cover the needs for the local funds.
I think I may refer to the finance director, Steve, on this one. I know that he is currently talking to the finance committee as well as he and I have been discussing, and I believe we're in the general vicinity that we've been in past years. As far as local funds that we're expecting or anticipating coming in.
Mr. Chairman, the Finance Committee will be looking at not only the schedule of this coming meeting, but also the financing. Our discussions, preliminary discussions, were to kind of change the process that the council were to get these projects, in that the engineering was going to do the projects and recommend those that are proposed and needed from an engineering standpoint, and that the Finance Committee would be looking at the total financing package to make sure that those dollars are available. The dollars that collectively on the spreadsheet that Public Works Director Christensen has given to the council, the local funding sources at this point are not sufficient to cover all of those projects, and so that discussion will have to take place at the Finance Committee level, and the timing that he has on his schedule will fit into the bonding. So the Finance Committee will have to look at all the funding sources in order to do this level of projects.
Mr. Meskey.
I guess you sort of answered my question, but I was looking at the construction pieces that are on here. I think they all fall within Ward 4. And 4 of those projects were on was on last year that got axed, and I had heard from some constituents about that. Is it really going to happen this year? If we move this forward, is this listed in a priority listing, or will we have to revisit that? Can I tell them with any assurance that those stub streets now are longer now, they're going to reach over to the highway, that there's a high likelihood if we move into a public or, having a public meeting that they're going to actually probably be assessed.
As far as priority goes for your first question, I don't know that I've listed these as any priority. I could probably give you a priority or ask a priority of this body. The intent, because we pulled those last year and with the idea of rescoping those and increasing the scope, was that they would be, again, be on the list this year. And so off the top of my head, my opinion would be that they would be first priority.
Okay, thank you.
Comments, questions? Ms. Nelson?
Could you just expand a little? I know we were frustrated last year that these projects were pulled, and so you guys came up with this process for us to try to find a way to get as much done as we can. But you also spoke at the Public Works meeting about wanting us to approve all of these to begin with, and that as the timeframes go and we look at the financial side of it, could you just expand on that a little bit with what your thoughts were and the timeframes when commitments would be made?
Sure. To back up a little bit, in the past we've had different variations of when projects get pulled. Obviously some frustration, some probably excitement when those projects get pulled. What we tried to do this year, Director Okins and I have tried to get a, albeit preliminary, budget together for these projects at the time of this report, which you may not have seen to this extent in the past. The intent with that, or the idea with that, is that when you're pulling projects, you're pulling because you're looking at some of the funds. Most of the time it boils down to money. I mean, almost everything does. And so the intent with adding this money or this budgetary item in here was that when you pull projects, if we have to pull projects, I should say, we know exactly what dollars will change. In the past, what's happened is we've pulled projects because you've asked me and I've said, well, it'll reduce by about this much money, and that should be sufficient. The intent this time is to know exactly what those, again, estimates are that we are pulling, and also what that prevents is sending notices out to people whose projects get pulled after they get the notices. And so this way we know ahead of time which ones we're pulling, if any, and those notices won't go out at all at this point.
The other question I had was, I know some of us expressed frustration that some streets weren't on these lists. And so would you just review, if somebody's concerned about their street, I know there's a place they can go. Can you just talk about that a little bit about?
Sure. And you're exactly right. Some of these streets, by and large, a lot of these streets are on here because someone has stopped in and said, please do my street. If we get enough people that say that, I've got a couple in my head that people have said, please do X street, the block in front of my house. And then what we'll do is we look at that, we look at the age of that street, we look at those reports that have presented with this, and then we compare that and have discussions with the municipal utilities. What age is your water line? Is it a problem area? Do you have issues with that? Because we have to add that into the project. Do we have issues with storm drain in that area? So maybe we should upgrade that at the same time to try to make it a full street project if it's a reconstruct. I mean, if it's just got some potholes and we can get away with an overlay, that's a little easier to add those in at any given time. But by and large, a lot of these are on the list twofold, both because of the age and the quality of the pavement, and people have said, please do my street.
Okay. So if somebody wants to know what their rating is on their street, I know that these forms have the information on the streets that we're doing. Where can they go to find that out?
Call into my office. They can get any information, probably more information than they want on their given street, and somebody within that office will explain what each of those numbers means, whether it falls into our overlay, what we're considering the overlay category, or the reconstruct category, and what that means to them.
Good. Mr. Christensen, having heard that we are doing this a little bit differently this year than what we have in the past, both from a public works standpoint and a finance standpoint, and hearing from finance that this maybe is an ambitious plan, and that doesn't mean bad or anything like that, it just means ambitious. That can be great. But we did have some discussion, and I think it was valuable discussion, also regarding the financial benefit when it comes to the bid process of doing it this way, as opposed to, and specifically germane to projects potentially being pulled, changing it up and doing it this way, being financially advantageous to the city as opposed to ways that we've done it in the past. Could you expound on that just a little bit, please?
Well, as I tried to explain, albeit not very well, Director Okins and I have always get together on estimates every year. What we've tried to do this year is get together a little sooner. These are the ideas of what streets we're thinking about. You know, it looks like a long list. What do the numbers look like? And so then within the engineering department, we put together the numbers. This year, we tried to do that sooner, again, before we even present the list of streets to this body. So the idea with that is, again, to have all of the costs put in here. So as you notice on that spreadsheet, if you zoom in far enough, you'll notice on the spreadsheet, it's got construction, contingencies, and engineering on every project. Okay, so we're trying to emulate the total cost of doing that particular project. Okay, so along with that, as you scroll to the right on those, it breaks down the dollars. You know, it even breaks out the street dollars, the water dollars, storm dollars, and things of that nature. So the idea is to present all these dollars to you folks earlier, with the you know, the potential, you know, downside of the bids coming in, you know, significantly off of these numbers, which is always a struggle for an engineer. My goal is always within 10%. And secondly, I don't want to be the low bidder. And so that is something we've tried. We've taken past projects, we've taken past contractors, we've taken different numbers and trying to put these together. The idea again is so that if we have to pull a project, and by we I mean the council, if we have to pull a project, we know exactly what those dollars do. We can put it into the spreadsheet and very quickly know what that does to the bonding number, to the cash number, to the city obligation number.
And in your opinion, when would be the optimum time in the timeline to do that?
My opinion would be shortly after the finance department discusses, or the finance committee rather discusses the options available and where those shortfalls might be, but by no means later than the improvement hearing, which is I'm proposing set for March 18th.
Okay, so if we're going to begin those discussions, I assume with the next finance meeting, then that should still keep us within our timeline so we can keep this rolling along.
Correct. Provided, you know, and it is on the schedule for the next finance committee meeting, which is this Thursday. And in that case, you will discuss it at the next council meeting, first meeting in March.
Okay. Mr. Okins.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Plow, and members of the council. If you look at page, the electronic version of 103 of your packet, that is where the budget portrays the dollar amounts that we'll be looking at. The Community Investment Fund is a big portion of what has to pay the bonds back. Those are the projects that Mr. Christensen alluded to that are not included in your improvement report. Some of those as being the stormwater, the signal lights, and the path works, and that's where the issue comes into play, where we are looking at finding alternative funding sources for those types of projects that are included in this overall budget. That $3 million that the Community Investment Fund has to fund, you know, equates to about $400,000 annually on a 10-year program. So those are the areas that we're looking at. The overlays and the reconstructs are well within the current assessment dollars that you see there of 1.7.
All right, thank you, Mr. Elkins. Okay, to the council, knowing what the overall proposed budget is and seeing what the timeline is there council appetite to continue this process forward? Or objection, rather? If there's not objection, then I am going to myself enter the motion that we set the improvement, or that we accept the improvement report for 2019 street improvements and order the improvement hearing for March 18th at 7:01 p.m. and adopt the preliminary budget.
Second.
Two separate motions.
Oh, those are two separate motions. Okay. So first motion first, that we accept the improvement report for the 2019 street improvement and order the hearing for March 18th at 7:01 p.m.
Second.
Motion made and seconded for a resolution to receive the report, street improvement report, and set the public hearing for March 18th. Councilmember Alvarado.
I have no comment.
Is there comments from anybody? Roll call.
Councilmember Nelson.
Aye.
Meske.
Aye.
Schwantes.
Aye.
Davis.
Aye.
Alvarado.
Aye.
Osmus.
Aye.
Plowman.
Aye.
7 ayes, 0 nays.
That resolution passes. Next would be a resolution to adopt the 2019 preliminary budget. Mr. Plowman, if you want to enter that.
I would make that motion.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve a resolution to adopt the 2019 preliminary budget. Discussion. Roll call.
Councilmember Meske.
Aye.
Schwantes.
Aye.
Davis.
Aye.
Alvarado.
Aye.
Osmus.
Aye.
Plowman.
Aye.
Nelson.
Aye.
7 ayes, 0 nays.
The resolution passes as well. Councilmember Plowman,
Okay, I promise this is my last one. This is my first time doing this, but
you're doing great.
thank you for bearing with me. Staff did bring forth for discussion with regards to the Willmar Y Master Utility Agreement and options for participation by the city for water line installation. The municipal utilities is proposing a 50-50 split of the original estimate, $1.3 million, or as bid, $813,500. Past water line relocation projects such as East Trunk Highway 12 and West Trunk Highway 12 in coordination with 19th Street Northwest have been paid 100% by the municipal utilities. The committee did recommend sending to the full council for further discussion. In other words, we did not send a recommendation for a resolution, but we wanted to discuss it here at the council table. And in order to keep us from getting further lost, I'm going to kick that back to Public Works for any further information that they might have to accompany this and kind of enlighten the council as to what is going on and maybe spark some further conversation or questions.
Thank you, Councilmember Plowman. This, of course, is in accordance with the Willmar Y project and more specifically with the highway relocation of the Willmar Y project. And so it's a MnDOT project, and they, as you no doubt are aware, they've selected their design build contractor. They're currently working through the contracts for that. And so that agreement that was included was the really early initial agreement, which is why that number at the top left corner is pretty scary. Everybody padded that number. Every time it went across somebody's desk, they padded it again. And so the bid price, or the, as bid price, is 2/3 of that number. That's the number we're talking about, and that would be a, dare I say, a worst case scenario for the water lines that need to be relocated or were determined to be conflict areas, I think is a better terminology. That'll be water lines under the new highway. The reason it was potentially, or put together that way, was if we're putting a new highway in, should we put a new water line in? Let's estimate that we are putting a new water line in everywhere that there's a new highway. That being said, some of those may not need to happen during this project. Now, that leaves it very vague and very ambiguous number, but that's where we are at this point. And this project, the highway portion of this project will happen over the next 2 summers. And so these water lines, whatever is determined, and I assume at this point, or at some point, we'll be having more discussions specifically with the contractor on which ones are needed, which ones need to be done now, and which ones maybe could wait to do those projects or those sections of water line. So what we're talking about here is a maximum dollar amount that is for all conflicts, water line conflicts with the relocated Trunk Highway 12.
Ms. Osmond?
So just so I'm clear, 1.3 million would be the worst-case scenario if we replaced every water line that was in a conflict area. 813,000 is what we think it might be?
No, the original estimate before the contractors put their dollars and submitted their bid to MnDOT was 1.3. And we arrived at that by picking the estimates that we had from past projects, no doubt adding enough to there to not be a shock to anyone if it came in higher than our number, and then sent it to MnDOT, which my guess is they did the same thing, added some more contingencies to the top of that. So that was the original estimate. The only reason I put that $1.3 million number in the agenda was because that is the dollar amount that's listed at the top of that agreement. The dollar amount that was bid by this contractor was the $800,000. So that one, to me, is the worst case, the $800,000. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Mr. Maskey?
Since we decided that we're going to have this discussion here, I guess we're going to have it here. There's a discrepancy, obviously, from who we believe has responsibility on this project. So if I could please hear the city's position. I see we have John Herron here. I would imagine he can share his perspective as well. So if we're making that decision, we can weigh it out. I'd like to hear, because I'm seeing a scenario that ranges from the city doing it 50-50 to the utilities doing it. And so maybe hearing our rationales would be helpful.
Sure, and I'll try to keep mine short. I just looked at the clock again. I apologize for that. But my proposal from day one on this particular section of this project was that MUC pays 100% of this cost. That's my proposal. I'm basing that on the 2 projects listed under the history on your car form there. East Highway 12, West Highway 12, within the last few years have both had water line replacement projects. MUC paid 100% of those. Outside of drive approaches, hydrants, things of that nature that MUC does not participate in. So that was the rationale I used for my 100% proposal. The other part of that is all utilities within this project have paid for their utility relocation. So all dry utilities, all wet utilities, the gas line, anything that needed to be relocated was paid for by those individual utilities. Was not paid for by the project. That being said, the other thing this council has done for years on this particular project was say our contribution to this project is land, no cash. So that was I guess 3, I said 2, the 3 pieces of rationale that I used to come up with the 100%.
Thank you.
Seeing as how we have Mr. Herron here with us tonight, I think it'd be only appropriate to get some further perspective from the MUC. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Councilmember Plowman. Thank you, Mayor, Council. To expand further on what Mr. Christensen has elaborated regarding the project, MUC, the commission itself has not offered to do a 50-50 split for clarification there. That 50-50 split came at staff level discussions from me as a way to entertain a possible solution and to move this discussion off of first base. So the commission has not agreed to a 50-50 split. I had at last staff level meetings, I had offered to take that 50-50 split to the commission for consideration. Some clarification on the two projects that Mr. Christensen alluded to, East Highway 12. That was a $20,000 project that had to do with reconstruct of Highway 12. The state moved the road. We did not have the depth of cover on a short section of water line, so we lowered that section of water line. City asked if we would pay for that. It was $20,000. Rather than disputing the payment, WMU picked up the payment of that. However, on Highway 12 West, as Mr. Christensen alluded to, the city picked up all the hydrants on that project. They picked up the paving on the project. It was roughly $35,000 of the city share of that project. We picked up about $60,000 of it. That project started when the city was doing a construction project on 19th Street Southwest. That water main, the utility's been asking for that water main along Highway 12 to replace for a number of years because it's in poor condition. At this point, we have not been able to address that for various reasons, and it needs to be replaced. When they tapped into that water main broke. It was repaired, broke again, repaired. Probably was it 3 incidents, Mr. Christensen? 2, if not 3. Finally, that main was shut down. And the city and utility met a number of times. There was about a month that had elapsed. There was a public safety issue going on there. And the reason it wasn't moving forward is because of payment of that project. Now, nobody wanted to be on the front page of the newspaper because that project wasn't moving forward. So in the spirit of keeping this thing going, the utility agreed to pick up the water main proportion of that project, and the city agreed to pick up the fire hydrants and the paving of that project. Those projects, in addition to the Y project that was going on, led to the MOA that the council and commission had joint meetings on and agreed to how we were going to transition from the utility fee for replacement of water mains, from the city paying for it under past practice, current practice, to the transition coming in 2021. So that was all kind of part of these projects, what prompted those discussions. So we have the Y project here. Sean did a very thorough job of explaining the MnDOT agreement that needs to be entered into, but the remaining piece of that is the breakdown of payment for that project. That project consists of a fair amount of 12, majority of 12. I believe there's a little bit of 16-inch line in there. And our past agreement between the utility and the commission has been that the city picks up 25%, or picks up 75% up to and including 8-inch, and that's spelled out in the MOA that was agreed to. And the utility picks up the 25% plus 100% of the incremental costs over the 8-inch. So when we talk about 50-50, as I alluded to earlier, to move this project forward and for the city and utility to understand the responsibility financially of this project, I had offered to take that to the commission. So that's where we ended up with the 50-50. It's not approved or agreed to by the commission. I would still have to take that to the commission for consideration of that as the wishes of the council to move forward with that type of split or something different other than what we have in our policy.
Thank you, Mr. Herron. And I think just in the order of clarification, and we did have the discussion at the committee level too, just a reminder to myself and for anybody else that wants it, but we're not competing entities here, although it may seem like it. It's our responsibility to come up with the most fiscally responsible way of doing this, but we're not competing entities, and it's not, we don't want to look at it in that light at all. It's got to be more of a strategic discussion, and we want that to be the message that's heard loud and clear by the municipal utilities and everybody else for that matter. But with that being said, further questions, comments, concerns? Mr. Mayor?
You know, we're going into uncharted water here, pun intended. And I don't think any of us knew that this was on the forefront, or we would have probably tried to include it in the agreement. And we'd have had those costs picked up by the project. But we're in a situation where you're either gonna take the money from Peter or you're gonna take it from Paul. That's all family. You're gonna take it out of the right pocket or the left pocket. Doesn't make any difference where you take the money. But at the end of the day, the project, the Y project, is a benefit to the community of Willmar. And we've said that from the very beginning, and I think I fully support that. That is how we have to look at this. How the council chooses to address this will send a message. It will send a message that we are cooperative and want to work with our right and left pocket, Peter and Paul, or we want to try to not intentionally, unintentionally, cause some friction. If you take a look at what we accomplished last year with the MOAs we put in place, and how we did the franchise fees and the service fees, last year, we came together and did that cooperatively. So I'd request the council to consider those actions and how you work cooperatively to make that happen. And then come up with an idea on how you're gonna share these costs. I don't have an idea on how to recommend you share the costs, but at the same point, I just want us to understand that, I mean, we're not competing agencies, as you said, Councilmember Plowman. We're working together, and at the end of the day, this is the right thing to do for our community. I think the other message that could be sent, which was inferred by our Public Works Director, our city engineer, is maybe some of these projects we can wait on. And collaboratively, they could talk about that and say, which ones can we wait on? We know the hard cost of $813,500. But if we can have some additional savings and pass those on to projects when those projects come in, bid them into a project rather than being outside of a project, that might be advantageous for the council and the commission as well.
Any other questions? Councilwoman Osmus.
Thank you. How long do we have? Is this a cost for 2021, or when do we have to pay this?
Mr. Christensen.
Members of the council, I was just trying to find that in the agreement, and of course, it's not in there, but I've got that question posed to MnDOT as we speak. My assumption at this point is that highway project, portion of the project, rather, will be constructed over the next 2 summers, 2 construction seasons. And so along with those, I'm just thinking of the specific areas of the conflict. My assumption at this point that those waterline conflict or construction projects would be over 2 summers. But I will find out specifically and get that to you as well.
Mr. Meske.
Forget my oversimplification of the matter, but I think Peter and Paul end up being the citizens of the city of Willmar. And so how do we plan to pay for this as a city, as an MUC, if it's divided 50-50 or in 100% on one pocket or the other? That'd be a question for whomever's responsible for a city position or an MUC position, because this ultimately is money that the public wasn't expecting to spend on this project and now has to do so. So I guess I'd like some clarification of how do we intend to find this money.
I have a statement to go along with that hypothetical. I think there's a little bit, the unknown variable there is in that we do have an offer on the table, but it was at a staff level from the municipal utilities, has not been formalized by their commission, so to speak. And so that in and of itself would give us a little bit of clarification to that question, although dollars are one and the same. It's where it's coming from.
Well, in my experience, the utilities is very forward-thinking and have planned this out and know exactly what they would be planning to do. Just my experience. I don't want to call anybody out here specifically, but this is a large dollar amount, and whether you split it or you don't, truly to the citizen really probably doesn't matter what pocket you're pulling it out of. I just would like to know what this means for the average citizen of the city.
Thank you, Councilmember Baumann. I think we were all caught off a little off guard by the presentation or the information that came to the Public Works and the message that staff was carrying for the city to pick up 100%. I think we sort of asked if there wasn't a way to go back to have additional conversations with the MUC to find another way to do this. What I don't know is the time frame that we have to, I mean, can we send this back to both of you to have another conversation? What is the time frame that needs to operate? And we're still needing to pay those dollars. And the other question, and I think we asked this, but I don't remember for sure how the answer was were you a part of this negotiation? Were you a part, of this all along, or did the city negotiate this with the utilities included in expecting the utilities just to pay for this? So.
Councilmember Nelson, I don't know if I have an answer for you on that. This is a design-build project from what I understand, and on the onset, as Mr. Christensen alluded to, the conflicts were identified in the project, and staff, utility staff, along with city staff, were around the table with MnDOT, looking at what the conflicts are going to be. So.
Is there a time?
That answers your question.
Yeah, so you were aware of it, but the discussion hadn't taken place with who was going to be responsible for it?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, who's going to be responsible? And my personal opinion, I don't want to speak for the commission as a whole, but I agree with what's said here. I mean, it's all the same pot. It's the citizens. They're paying it. They're paying a replacement fee. This project come up. It was not in the city's 5-year, 10-year plan, from what I understand. It wasn't in the utilities 10-year plan. This project come up. It's a good project for the city. We all acknowledge that. It's just how do we move forward here with the payment of the costs associated with the replacement of the water mains. So.
What is the deadline as far as a date with, why we are dealing with this tonight versus keep negotiating?
I believe, and Mr. Christensen probably can shed more light on it than I can, but I believe that agreement that's in your packet tonight needs to be executed by the council shortly here so that MnDOT can issue contracts to the contractor.
Yeah, Councilmember Nelson, I think the contract's already been executed.
That's
we're just deciding between the two of us how it's going to be paid.
Okay.
So we have,
Yeah, it was
that's what I thought.
Sorry, it was executed January 15th.
Yes, okay. So for us to sit and continue the conversation tonight, the statements that have been made, I think were made very eloquently with, you are the city, we are the city together, and how are we going to do this for our community? So, but I'm not sure we can accomplish that right here, right now.
Sure.
Councilmember Meske.
I don't think the city nor the utilities were aware of this originally, how this was going to play out. And as I look at it, it has to be paid. The project is out of the gates. And so to make sure that these two organizations will continue to work with some synergy, I would move for the 50-50 split of the cost and let these organizations figure out how that money is going to be collected.
Second.
Been a motion made and seconded to split the cost 50-50 and have staff work out the details. Additional discussion. Councilman Plowman.
Thank you. Just for clarification, then, is this something that would have to, before further discussion could take place, would this have to be something that would have to be run through the commission first and then the discussion with city staff?
I believe city staff pretty well vetted this out. If the council is open to the 50-50, I'll take it back to the commission and ask for them to endorse that request and bring the decision forward. And if they support that between staff, utility staff, and city staff, we'll plan accordingly.
Councilmember Plowman, if I may.
May.
We vetted out, Mr. Herron's right, we vetted out the percentage and who's paying what to some extent. We don't have a budget for it. So that part has not been vetted out yet.
Should this motion pass, do we have the time and or ability to bring it to the finance committee and start working with it there? In terms of taking a look at the project timeline, actual costs, and where that money might come from?
Short answer, yes. I don't know that it would make the meeting day after tomorrow. But short answer, yes, it would have to.
I just meant in general.
Go to Public Works and or probably Finance with, maybe I would attend that as well, or John can, and as far as how and where that money comes from.
Okay, so it is feasible.
Yes.
It'll just take a little work.
Yep.
Okay.
Additional discussion. Councilmember Schwantes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would say the finance director would be better prepared to make comments on where those funds would come from, but we do have the PIR fund that we would be able to borrow from ourselves to pay that and pay ourselves back, so.
Additional discussions to the question of a 50-50 split and have staff work out the details. Additional discussion. Roll call.
Councilmember Schwantes.
Aye.
Davis.
Aye.
Alvarado.
Aye.
Osmus.
Aye.
Plowman.
Aye.
Nelson.
Aye.
Maskey.
Aye.
7 ayes, 0 nays.
That resolution passes. Thank you for your time, Councilmember Plowman.
Thank you, and I'll move your motion forward to the commission, and I'll respond back to Mr. Holland there with the commission's discussion and motion to support, hopefully.
And I guess the only thing is that if the commission does not go with a 50-50 split, then it would come back because there would not be agreement on the commission side. So we just need to understand that. It's not necessarily done.
Yeah, correct. As I say, I'll move it forward and hopefully be able to move it along expeditiously so that we can have an agreement here and have this resolved. And then city can plan, utility can plan accordingly.
City Attorney Scott.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Before you move on to another agenda item, I would recommend that the council actually take action to approve this contract with MnDOT. I looked at this a couple weeks ago, I think, and I don't believe that this contract was listed in the list of contracts that was approved by the city at the end of 2018. If the city engineer thinks I'm wrong, I'd turn to him, but.
Well, I always hesitate to tell an attorney they're wrong, but
I could be.
I thought they were all listed. If it was not, then yes, we should make that
I
formality.
do remember looking at this a couple weeks ago, and I'm fairly certain that this specific agreement was not included in the package of agreements attached to the master agreement. So I would recommend that the council pass a resolution approving this agreement and authorizing the mayor and city administrator to execute it.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve the Willmar Y Master Utility Agreement and have the mayor and city administrator sign on behalf of the city. Discussion. Roll call.
Councilmember Davis.
Aye.
Alvarado.
Aye.
Osmus.
Aye.
Plowman.
Aye.
Nelson.
Aye.
Maskey.
Aye.
Schwantes.
Aye.
7 ayes, 0 nays.
The resolution passes as well. Councilmember Plowman.
That was the last item on our agenda for that evening. We concluded just short of 7 p.m. And that was the end of our business for that night. Point of clarification, do I need to motion to close these minutes or approve the minutes?
Approve the minutes.
Okay, then I would so make that motion to approve the minutes of the Public Works meeting.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve the Public Works minutes as presented. Councilmember Schwantes. I'm sorry, City Administrator Holland.
Mayor, we pulled 2 items from the consent agenda, items H and I. and we need a motion to approve those as well. If
Yeah, they were in this so that the reports were given in this, so by approving those, you approve those as well. Because they were on consent before, so this is a motion.
the city clerk was asking me for that, so
They're part of the minutes.
it's just, if we're going to
Reports
include that or not. Go ahead, Judy. Why don't you-
I guess they were asked to be discussed during the Public Works, Public Safety report. They weren't actually a part of the minutes as presented in the packet.
They were presented as part of the report that Councilmember Plowman submitted. So he submitted a full report. A verbal report was given both by the police chief and the fire chief. So that supersedes a written report that was submitted under a consent item. Mr. Scott, am I incorrect?
No, Mayor, I think I think that works fine, because I think that was the city's practice several years ago in the committees, that this would just be an information item. It might be different if this were a specific action the council had to take to approve something, but you just received them.
Right, they're received for reports.
Received them as among the minutes with the Public Works Committee.
Correct.
Thank you.
Motion made and seconded. Additional discussion. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion does carry. Next, we have the Finance Committee report. Councilmember Nelson.
Thank you. Finance Committee met on Thursday, February 7th in the conference room at 5:15. The first item listed on our minutes, we did select members of the committee that were there with myself, Councilmember Fagerly, Councilmember Plowman, and Councilmember Osmus. I was elected as chair, Councilmember Fagerly was elected as vice chair, and Finance Director Mr. Elkins was there, and I don't believe the minutes reflect, but Councilmember Alvarado was also there as a guest in the back. We did not have any comments from the public. We set our meetings to be held on the Thursday following the city council meetings at 5:15. So we will be meeting twice a month on those Thursdays, the same week of the council meetings. The first item, and I'll ask Mr. Elkins also to assist with this, was the Main Street preliminary budget. We reviewed the budget submitted by Planner Swedberg, and the committee did receive an explanation on the $24,500, and I think I will ask Mr. Elkins, I know he had some additional information on that.
Yes, Madam Chair. I did check with the staff member assigned to Main Street of committee, and she did give me the information that the $24,500 that was listed in the budget as other were two grants. One is an artisan grant from Main Street for $20,000 for 2019, and there'll be an additional $10,000 in 2020. And the $4,500 was a mini grant from Minnesota Main Street. So they were two grants, but they were listed as other.
All right. We did have a motion to pass a resolution to approve the Willmar Main Street preliminary budget for a total of $57,000, and I will enter that motion.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to adopt the budget for Main Street, Willmar, in the amount of $57,000. Discussion. Roll call.
Councilmember Alvarado.
Aye.
Osmus.
Aye.
Plowman.
Aye.
Nelson.
Aye.
Maskey.
Aye.
Schwantes.
Aye.
Davis.
Aye.
7 ayes, 0 nays.
That resolution passes.
The next item we discussed was to amend the credit card policy. And again, I'll let Mr. Elkins just update us. There was a conflicting section in there that we were just asked to correct. And I don't know if you have any additional comments that you'd like to make about the credit card policy.
No, Madam Chair, the conflicting, there were two sections in the policy. One allowed the administrator to designate employees who could have credit cards. And then later in the policy, there was a paragraph that specifically stated basically department directors, and this would not allow supervisors or other individuals who would need those. So we recommended to omit the designation and allow the city administrator authority to authorize issuance of credit cards.
Thank you. We did have a motion to approve the changes in the credit card policy, and I will enter that now.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to adopt the resolution amending the credit card use policy. Discussion. Roll call.
Councilmember Osmus?
Aye.
Plowman?
Aye.
Nelson?
Aye.
Maskey?
Aye.
Schwantes?
Aye.
Davis?
Aye.
Alvarado?
Aye.
7 ayes, 0 nays.
The resolution passes.
The next items were just for discussion purposes. We had an information on an uncollectible accounts receivable. There is no action that was needed to be taken, but we did have a good discussion regarding that with how we ended up in that position to not receive the lease payments. It was regarding a bankruptcy. And I don't know if you have any further comments. I know you did some homework on some of the questions that we asked at that time, and I do believe that the process inside the department has changed so that this probably won't happen again, so.
Madam Chair, the delinquency was in an egg lease, and the city has changed their policy to require payment by the end of February now on all egg leases, so that should resolve that issue.
Okay. I believe this lease was assigned also, is that not correct? And that was the discussion that took place too, with whether the payment was made before the allowing the lease to be assigned.
The process, it had been turned over to the city attorney for collection. The assignment went to another individual, and that individual was a successful bidder for the 19 through 22 lease. So he is in that same parcel. So.
And the last item we discussed was the 2019 improvement funding. We had a discussion about that before. And I don't know if Mr. Okins would like to comment any, it is on our agenda for this next meeting, and I think I will let him just speak to that if he has any additional comments.
I guess the discussion will be at our meeting on Thursday. This was an item brought up by a committee member and was not originally on the agenda, so we'll have more information as well as a timing and a projected bond schedule at the meeting on Thursday.
The only comment I would add to that is I do think that staff was trying to find a way for us to be able to look at the options in order to get some of the street projects done. Last year, I know we had an issue with the bond limits had been set. So I think this does give us an opportunity to be creative and see if there's a way that we can keep working on our streets. So there was no other business that before the meeting. We adjourned at 6:10, and I will make a motion to approve the minutes of the meeting unless there is any other questions.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Further discussion. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. That motion does carry. Next, the Labor Relations Committee report of February 11th. Councilmember Maskey.
The Labor Relations Committee met on February 11th, 5:15 at the Willmar City offices. We had many items to discuss. Only a few items came out for action. We are looking at a GIS specialist surveying job description. Had some questions on that. You may see a job coming forward with a new description shortly. We did ask for some information about the project manager and what project they are managing. We received that. Talked about a public works intern in the future, not in the budget, so we were thinking maybe seasonal staff may be able to perform some of those duties. All of those were sort of internal, and we're doing research on them. We spent the majority of our items on, or our time on items 6 and 7, 2 policy. Well, one's a policy, one's more of a practice, but we were looking at department head sick leave policy and continue to talk about where that level should be and pay scale maximums and where the council has set those and ability to pay over that, whether it is a salary or in lump sums, and those conversations continue. We're talking also about total compensation, so that kind of stuff is being gathered. So we have no items as far as those are concerned, but those will continue to be hot button items and expect something in the near future. The last item where we do have something for you to consider this evening was in the city administrator review. We're a little earlier than that, so I apologize to the city administrator. If you're wondering, the start date is April 26th, and we will respect that. But we did thought we would put forward some ideas here so you've got some time scale that we are looking at. If you take a look, there was a motion made by the Labor Committee to I'll get you the right here, is to distribute the review form to the council on March 25th and having the due date back April 8th. That will be your time scale for actually doing the review. As we've done before, I do believe, is it in here this time? It will be. I think it was sent out under a separate piece that we did send out the instrument. If you have any comment, you must get that to us soon so we can make the change before this deadline. But we thought it was important to have a deadline and stick to that. So you see here we have a motion made for, again, distributing the stuff on March 25th and having it returned by April 8th. So that comes as a motion.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to distribute the information for the city administrator along with the dates that they're due. Discussion. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. The motion does carry. Councilman Maskey.
And the other one is that once those do come in on that due date of April 8th, that they would be processed by the HR director, and we would move into a closed session to review those on April 29th. And that comes as a motion from the Labor Committee as well.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to have the Human Resources Director tabulate the findings and report out to the council at the meeting on April
29th.
29th.
And that's when we would do the closed session to review that with the city administrator.
Additional discussion. Councilmember Nelson.
I've spoke up on all of these, and I need to do this again. I'm very uncomfortable with asking the Human Resource Director to do that. She is accumulating the information on the person that she reports to. We have used the city attorney in previous matters, and I think that it would be appropriate for us to do that in this respect again. And I will offer an amendment to this motion to ask that the results be tabulated by the city attorney.
I'll second that motion.
Motion made and seconded to have the city attorney tabulate the findings. Additional discussion. Councilmember Plowman.
Question for Attorney Scott. What's the feasibility of that? Is that something in your purview?
Councilmember Plowman, members of the council, certainly we have done that before. If the council would like us to do that, we can do it again. For what it's worth, I do think the HR director is fully capable of fulfilling that function as well. It's an administrative HR function, but whatever the council's comfort zone is, we're happy to help in whatever way asked.
Councilmember Maskey.
We did have a conversation about that. When a city attorney did this in the past, we did not have a human resource director, and we have one now, and that's typically part of the duties of the HR director. The HR director is a confidential employee and has other benefits that are part of that process, and to have somebody else outsource and pay for that when we have a capable person on staff seems to be like a waste of money.
Councilmember Nelson.
This is nothing about the HR director. In fact, I think this is a protection for the HR director. I think it is out of respect for the roles of the different positions, and she is a direct report of the person that she is tabulating the information for. Yes, she's a confidential employee, but I do think that our history has shown that we were wise to use the city attorney, and I am just speaking and requesting that again.
Additional discussion. Again, when this came up last year, it was discussed. I discussed it with our HR director, who was new at the time, and she said it was in the purview of how she had done it in the past, is that she would tabulate similar results. She understands she's a confidential employee. The ironic part here is that the record, after it's tabulated, is given to the HR director to file. So the HR director gets it. So, I mean, I got to kind of agree with Councilmember Maskey here. We're paying the city attorney, and when this was asked last year, he said the same thing he did this year, that they will do it, but it is not their practice in all of the cities that they provide services to have an HR director to do a similar service. So That's my comments as the mayor. Councilmember Meske.
In the 2 previous years, when we got to this point, I personally tabulated it to save the city the expense of having the city attorney do it. I'm not going to do that a 3rd time because it seems crazy to me when we have a capable person that would do that as part of their job. So I will just be silent.
All those, I'm sorry, roll call on the amendment to have the city attorney tabulate the results.
Councilmember Plowman,
No.
Nelson,
Aye.
Meske,
No.
Schwantes,
No.
Davis,
No.
Alvarado,
No.
Osmus.
No.
1 aye and 6 nays.
The amendment to the motion fails. On the motion to have the city administrator review results processed by the Human Resources Director with the date of April 28th as the due date, all those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. That motion does carry. Councilmember Meske.
And with that, that is the end of the Human Relations Committee, so I would file that report and move for its approval unless there are other questions.
I have a question. Going back to items 5 and 6, I didn't know how we were moving on with this when, after that was done. I don't mean to make you go back to it.
Yep.
But when you say that there's going to be continued discussion about the sick leave,
Yep.
oh, not 5, but 6 and.
You meant 6 and 7. I know
6
what
and
you
7,
meant,
sorry. Is that ahead of any discussions that would take place with union contracts?
No. Union contracts have all been settled.
Right.
And we know what those numbers are, but we never address department heads and where that number is because that is by policy. So we can address that at any time, and we haven't addressed it for many years, and we want to know where that level should be and what's appropriate and so on. So that's what we're talking about. It would not have anything to do with the existing contracts that have been settled.
Okay, I knew that. I was just wondering if we were just doing legwork ahead of time before the next negotiation. But you're looking at.
We are not negotiating for contracts. We are simply addressing the policy.
Okay.
That would be for all non-represented groups.
Correct.
So
Yep.
not just.
But no, it is whoever's covered by the policy, of course, who doesn't have a contract.
Okay.
Additional discussion. All in favor of the motion to file a minute signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. That motion does carry. Next, we have the Community Development Committee report. Someone's going to have to help me with who the vice chair is. Councilmember Davis. Wow, you get a report right away. Are you lucky? Councilmember Davis.
All right. So we met Monday, February 11th in the conference room, 6:15. And we called the meeting to order at 6:19. And Rick Fagerly was chosen as the chair, and I was chosen as the vice chair, and he's gone, so here I am. We talked about sale of city-owned land. Do we need to talk about that more? Should we have Ms. Swedberg come forward?
Madam Vice Chair, that particular item was for information only at this point. The council will see an introduction of an ordinance after the Planning Commission reviews it again. So I'm happy to go over details if that's what we wish, but the council will see that again at the next meeting.
The point of clarification is, wasn't there not under item number 4 a motion made and seconded to move forward with the sale of the property?
Yes and no. There's several different parts that have to kind of happen for this particular sale. And so, correct me if I'm wrong, but Planning Commission needs to review this first before there's an introduction of an ordinance. But because this particular parcel that's being looked at for the sale does not technically currently exist as a separate parcel, there's also some surveying work that needs to be done. And so that it all is the motion, y'all kind of have to,
Well, I think we're moving the motion, we made a motion to move this to the planning committee. I think that still is a step, is it not?
yeah.
So I think that's the action. When you say informational, I don't know if that, because the planning commission rings in on this, and then it will come back, but I think we were saying to move forward. I'm just thinking, I think that was the process, but.
City Attorney Scott.
Mayor, members of the council, I certainly think you could approve the recommendation to simply move this forward at a council tonight. It's not necessary to do that since this is kind of in motion now and it's going to go to the planning commission. But I think Councilor Meskey raises a good point that the committee wouldn't typically on its own just set the wheels running on a project like this without the council weighing in. So it's probably appropriate for the council to approve it at this point. It will be coming back.
Councilor Davis, do you want to introduce that motion?
Yes, I introduce a motion to
Do what the city attorney said.
do it. Move it forward. To move it forward.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to move the sale of city-owned land forward to the planning commission. Discussion. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. That motion carries.
All right, and next, staff explained that it'd been over 5 years since the planning, zoning, and rental inspection fees had been increased. And they reviewed fees from multiple cities and found that the cost of hearing notifications and mailing costs are not covering the fees that we're getting. So they want to raise the fees, correct? So then Council Member Muskie said he would like a breakdown on the costs, which we have in our packet.
And so what you'd want to do is consider an introduction of an ordinance amending plan and development departmental fees.
Okay.
Introduce that motion.
So I'd like to introduce a motion to amend the fees.
Planning and development fees and set a public hearing for March 4th.
The planning and development fees and set a hearing for March 4th.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Councilmember Meskey.
Could someone just quickly review what the changes will be proposed of how we're changing those fees? I know they're written here, but not everybody can read this.
Nope, absolutely. So what we have proposed, it's two parts to the ordinance because they're technically two separate ordinances right now. I'll start with the rental inspection fees because we've got the breakdown of those. So currently, we have the rental program, homes that are in that program, anyone who's renting out a home is required to be in that program. Reinspection happens every 4 years, I believe. And currently, to begin that process, you pay $50 per building plus $10 per unit. So a single family home would be $60, a duplex would be $70. It's being proposed that increase so that a single family unit is $100 at that registration fee, and then subsequently a duplex would be $120 or increased depending on how many units there are at that particular home. The failure to register the property fines and the reinspection fees there's no proposed changes to those particular fees. I did have Meg break down the timeline and what that costs currently, and we're looking at about $124.53 for every single family dwelling is what I'll call the minimum for a single family dwelling in that rental program. Again, this happens every 4 years. So talking about what cost we're asking our rental owners to bear, it's $100 every 4 years. Depending on if they've got those reinspection fees or not. And then for the land use and sign permit fees, we're requesting that conditional use permits, variances, and appeals increase from $275 to $350 per application, plus the county recorder fee, which is currently at $46. And then the rezoning and the text amendments, would increase from 275 to 400. Plan review would increase from 100 to 150. And right-of-way utility easement vacation would increase from 300 to 500. We've also included a new category of sign, which would be for temporary or portable signs. Currently, everything is calculated by square footage, but we recommend that we do this one lower step for those temporary signs that businesses put out for sales or various promotions that they have going on. All of those we broke down and looked at about 10 different other communities that have these fees as well. We wanted to be kind of in that middle range, making sure that we weren't an outlier. As Co-Chair Davis stated, we haven't increased these fees for about 5 years. So it's time with the increasing fees for public notification, both in the newspaper and the mailings, as well as staff time, to increase these fees.
Councilor Raski.
And I would also add, I think we talked about it, we are running a loss, a tremendous loss on all of these now. And even with these new numbers, we still may be running at a loss, but it's a much less loss.
Yes.
We were not trying to maybe even break even here because we didn't want to bring in and impose the actual cost. But this at least brings it up to a more reasonable number. But I still think we probably are still operating at a loss for these things. And I think the committee was okay with that, where those new levels are set.
Yes.
Additional discussion. Councilmember Alvarado.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When you talk about these costs, should there be some sort of maybe a percentage increase built into the numbers, like every 4 years or every couple of years? That would be an automatic adjustment. We all know that things don't go down in price, but something to think about to kind of factor that in so we don't have to, it just happens.
City Attorney Scott, I believe we have to handle this by a resolution, correct? Because it's a fee?
It can be by ordinance, which this is. And the question, I guess, is can you build an automatic inflator into the fee? And I haven't looked at that specifically. I don't think that's usually done in other cities, but that doesn't necessarily mean you couldn't do it.
Good idea. I know that last time this was brought to the council, the fee was requested to be higher, and then the council didn't approve it and pulled it down, as I remember. So I think that, council needs to decide if this is the direction you want to go. Additional discussion. Is this a resolution, or is this it's just setting the meeting, so that's just a simple motion, correct?
This is a simple motion to introduce an ordinance, correct?
Okay.
And set the hearing.
All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Trying to find my place on the agenda. I couldn't find where it was, so. Ms. Davis, you want to file the minutes?
All right, and then the last item was that Chair Fagerly inquired about the airport ag leases. Staff informed him that the lease agreements are handled by the airport manager. And that was about all, and then we adjourned at 6:32.
Motion to file.
Motion to file the minutes.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded to file the minutes. Discussion. Weren't the ag leases just redone just recently? Mr. Holland?
Right. Over the last 4 months, I've signed all the leases. It's taken us about 4 months to get them all through.
Okay.
But yes, Eric has been managing those along with myself and planning department.
Thank you. All those in favor of filing the minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. That motion does pass. Next is a resolution reinstating council subcommittees and establishing regular mini retreats. I thought we were going to go away from the word work sessions. But, Mr. Scott.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we can certainly go away from the word work session. This resolution is before you. It simply memorializes every decision the council made at its retreat and its subsequent council meeting to move away from the work session format you've been under the last 2 years and go back to your former committee structure. I won't walk through every detail in the resolution. I will say the reason to do this by resolution is because when you discontinued the committee structure and adopted work sessions, you did that by resolution and set forth all the parameters, so we should do the same thing now. I'd be happy to answer any questions if anyone saw any details in the resolution that they are wondering about.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to reinstate the council subcommittee and establish mini retreats. Councilmember Maskey.
I was going to move that, then just strike the term work sessions wherever it's work sessions / mini retreats. To read just mini retreat.
Okay, to the motioner and the seconder?
That is okay.
All those, roll call.
Councilmember Nelson.
Aye.
Maskey.
Aye.
Schwantes.
Aye.
Davis.
Aye.
Alvarado.
Aye.
Osmus.
Aye.
Plowman.
Aye.
7 ayes, 0 nays.
The resolution passes. Next is consideration of an ordinance of text amendment to zoning ordinance 6Q relating to technology district. Ms. Swedberg.
Mayor, members of the council, the Planning Commission has requested to consider allowing office, business, and professional uses outright in the technology district. They have reviewed this amendment and approved it on February 6th, 2019. It was approached that these uses are generally small spaces, all within mostly for the main office area on the campus. The campus has been established since 2006, and it's a bit unique in its district because the Midwest Technology Campus kind of has a second layer of protection, if you will, to the purpose of the district. And we felt that because it's just this one use, and we've got that second layer of protection, the office use is an allowable outright use to that district. So instead of Midwest having to come to the Planning Commission every time a new office space is coming to the campus, that they could just go ahead and have those spaces. Staff stays in close contact with the campus as to who's going out there, and they have a very set mindset of who they want out there, creating that campus culture for those office spaces. So it's staff recommendation that a motion to introduce the ordinance for a public hearing on March 4th.
So moved.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded to approve the introduction of text amendment to the zoning ordinance relating to the Midwest Technology District. Discussion. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. That motion does carry. Motion was made by Schwantes, seconded by Plowman. Is that what you were looking for?
No, I got it.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I seen you look and I thought maybe you didn't hear who made the motion, so. Next is consideration of introduction of an ordinance to rezone land from R2, 1 and 2 family, to I2, general industry. Ms. Swedberg.
Mayor, members of the council, the next item is the introduction of this rezone. It was again requested of the Planning Commission to consider rezone of land for continued industrial uses. These particular parcels, there's 4 of them. They have been owned by Perkins Lumber and BNSF for a lumber and rail yard for quite some time. It seems to have just been an oversight in the zoning map, and one of the companies, well, Perkins is potentially considering reconstruction of one of their buildings, but staff cannot allow that to occur until this rezone happens. The majority of land surrounding this is already I2, and we have no foreseeable residential for this particular parcels. So it's staff recommendation to introduce the ordinance for public hearing on March 4th.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to introduce the motion to rezone certain lands from R2, 1 and 2 family residential to I2 general industry. Set a hearing for March 4th. Discussion. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. That motion does carry. Next is consideration of Marcus Highway 12 Development Preliminary Plat. Ms. Swedberg.
Mayor's member of the council. The last item that I have is the Marcus Highway 12 Development Preliminary Plat. This is just the preliminary plat, so you will see the final again. I do have it here for viewing. So this is the old Elm Lane site. Marcus Construction recently purchased all of this property and is requesting a 2-lot rezone or replat of this area. There's intention for the access along Highway 12 to be realigned with 23rd Street. I've been in contact with MnDOT many a time about what's required for that and how Planning Commission can oversee that change and make sure that that occurs for traffic safety concerns along Highway 12. With that, staff recommends the motion to approve the preliminary plat with the 6 listed motions, or 6 conditions.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve staff's recommendation for consideration of Marcus Highway 12 Development Preliminary Plat. Council members, Councilmember Plowman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would be remiss if I didn't actually speak up and say how cool this is, because in my 36 years of life, I remember about 30 years back, this piece of land was the topic of conversation all about town, in the newspaper and around the dinner table and everywhere else. And so it is quite the honor and privilege to be sitting here overseeing this site plan and to be able to take part in voting on it, because I think that's pretty neat. Now I'm off my soapbox.
Neat things are good things.
Neat things are great things.
Additional comments from council. Ms. Swedberg, we know that this is an area that has drainage issues. Maybe not this particular piece, but I would assume that. Have we looked at a water management plan for that site?
There currently are no development plans submitted to the city for this particular site, so not yet. As Planning Commission always protects themselves from plat and conditional use permit standpoints, we always require that the stormwater ordinance be complied with and engineering department have all oversight of those requirements. So there is protection in there for when the developer comes forward with some sort of plans, that be of the utmost priority.
Certainly, because I know I've had a lot of complaints from Dolberg trailer sales and also the fireplace place where they get flooded quite regularly. I know the fireplace actually raised their lot just recently to prevent some flooding on their lot. And I know that Nelson International just hauled in a lot of fill, I believe that was last year. And a lot of that is now draining into the Cambridge subdivision, their drainage pond. And, when we have heavy rains, that looks like it's a gravel pit. Doesn't look like it's a pond any longer. So I know Councilmember Nelson took pictures and sent them to me last year on one of those heavy rains where all that runoff went into that pond. So I just want to make sure we address that as well. Additional conversations. Councilmember Nelson.
A quick question. You made a comment about Highway 12 and 23rd Street. I know that's been a concern from a traffic standpoint, so will we be in the loop with working with Highway 12, or is it strictly the developer's responsibility to do that?
It's the developer's responsibility to acquire the permits from MnDOT. We don't have jurisdiction over that road, so we can't permit that request, nor can we deny that request or make any other conditions other than Planning Commission will require that realignment and that permit to be obtained from MnDOT. So we're, to the extent that we can, we're requesting that be aligned, though we can't make the final decision on that, if that makes sense.
Additional discussions. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. That motion does carry. Thank you for your good work again this evening. Comments by the city administrator.
A couple of things tonight. First of all, I'd just like to publicly commend our police department. Over this last month, we're having a historic snow. Mr. Oken says that was for my benefit as a newcomer here to Minnesota. And so I appreciate that. And, we've had, 20 turnovers, in one day. It was about 61 below. So, but our police department is out there helping those people in those vehicles. Same time, our public works department has done a tremendous job, Gary and his crew, over this last month. It looks like after the snowfall tonight, we're going to be pushing our state record. So kudos to them. During this, weather, over this last weekend, Rob in the Civic Center and his crew hosted a skating party, had over a couple hundred kids out there skating and throwing a lot of popcorns. As he said, you give away free popcorn, it flies everywhere. So they learned a lesson on that, but appreciate their work out there. Also today, before you leave, say happy birthday to Chief Felt. I think he's 42 today, plus some. So today is his birthday. Also, congratulations, we had one of our first holiday brunches on Valentine's Day in the city offices, and we got together, and we haven't done that since I've been here, and I want to congratulate Samantha and Kelsey and others that put that together, and even though I got sick on some of the food, it was still a big success. So appreciate that, and we had safety training today, and we had cultural training here in the last week or two for all the employees, and we've been vigilant about that. Sam has anyway. She's, she will take down your name, and if you don't attend, she'll chase you down. So I'm glad to see that because, these classes are important. Our safety is number one, and we've got to have people prepared and understand what to do. And so if they don't know where to gather outside a building, or they don't know where a fire extinguisher is, or they don't know what to do when there's an active shooter, it can cost someone their life. And we see that every week in the news, unfortunately. And so I appreciate these safety classes. I take it seriously. And both instructors for the cultural training, I thought Zach was very well. How do you say his last name? Maboob? Yeah. He was excellent. I commend him. He did a great job. And the trainer today was excellent as well. So I appreciate that. So I wanted to point those things out. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Maskey.
Well, I guess all I would say is I like all four seasons, but winter is getting tiresome for me. But I will let you know that it's been kind of a costly winter. It's been with all the water mains that are breaking down and all of the snow removal, and apparently it is not done. I would just remind folks to be patient. I know we were detoured around for another water main break, and I think we're probably going to see more of those, I hate to say, because this is an unprecedented winter. So be patient. I would imagine spring will show up. At least there were robins that were very confused in my backyard the other day, which made no sense to me, but they should not have stayed when they did. All right.
Thank you, Councilmember Schwantes.
Thank you. I'd also just give a shout out to all the city staff that have gone above and beyond because of the snow, because of the water main breaks, just everyday work that people do. We are fortunate to have the folks we have in hand. So thank you for the work you do. And happy birthday, Chief Felt.
Councilmember Davis.
I'll pass.
Councilmember Alvarado.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to, I talked about this at the end of the year. I think we have to remember that when we ask a question, when we try to work together, it's because of positive intent. We're trying to get to the same place. We've got a great community. Let's just remember we're trying to work together. Thank you.
Is there something that I'm doing that's causing a conflict, or?
Not at all. Not at all. I think it's important that everybody hears that, because I think there's people that are, they question that. I think people question whether or not you want to be on the same page, or I just think there's some concern there at every level, not just at every level. So I just want to make sure that we're when we ask a question, we're trying to be better. We're trying to learn. That's all I'm saying, Mr. Mayor.
It seems like this keeps coming up. That's why I'm trying to dig a little deeper because, you know, if there's things that we can do differently, we should, I mean, we agreed that that's what we were going to do at the retreat.
Correct.
Is that if there's something that was going on, but if it's ambiguous, you can't correct if it's ambiguous.
Well, I don't think it's ambiguous. I think it's something that we have to think about. I think we have to realize that we ask a question, we want to learn, we want to work together. We don't want to be, if we're heading something up, we don't want to be paranoid about a decision or feel that somebody's going to circumvent the process or talk behind our back or whatever the case may be. But we want to work together to get to the best city we can be. And I think that we got to remember that there's reasons we do make decisions, and it's not to be vindictive. There's a big picture. It's not intended to undermine somebody. It's there's more to it, I think, sometimes than that. And I think some people don't think that way. I don't think they think positively. I think they think it's a personal attack or whatever, paranoia, whatever you want to call it. But I just think we have to remember that any one of the people in this room want to see a positive town. They want to see a successful town. And I just think we have to remember that. So.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I've thought a lot about that. And I mean, you brought it up, I think, 3 times now.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I've done a lot of thinking about that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, for 4 years, I was attacked just about every meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And we're back at it again. And I know you requested to go to the leadership training for the League of Minnesota Cities, and I think that's good. But, you know, when an organization is trying to move forward, the leaders of the organization have to have support.
Correct.
And you're not going to move forward if you don't have support. And you are going to feel paranoid, particularly when people go around behind your back. I know exactly what you're talking about. And that's why I'm digging a little deeper here.
Sure.
I had a bunch of stuff I wanted to say tonight, and I'm about this close to saying it. And it won't end up pretty.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, we're not in 2nd grade.
That's right.
And, you know, just because you don't like somebody and you don't want them to be successful doesn't mean you cut their feet off. And, you know, that's what we're doing. And
That's what I'm saying.
Exactly. And that's exactly what's happening at this table. And, you know, if this organization is going to move forward, we had an opportunity to move forward 4 weeks ago. And I'm trying to move forward. But it's tough. Councilmember Osmus.
I want to talk about snow some more.
Snow is good.
Well, I just want to say, just a friendly reminder to the citizens that because we're going to get some more, don't blow it into the street. And for the snow that is now starting to pile up in the streets, if everybody could please try to get their cars off of the street so that the plow drivers can have a nice straight shot and not have these bump outs where cars were parked. And then the police department doesn't have to start moving snowbirds. So, and also kudos to the fire department explorers for clearing out some of the fire hydrants. If you have that fire hydrant in front of your place, those are precious minutes that can be saved if you have a fire, that they don't have to be clearing that snow. So we're going to get dumped on again tonight, so make sure that you're clearing those fire hydrants. And then just a couple of reports from some of the committees I'm on. For the community center committee, if you haven't been out there lately, the public works guys put up some really fabulous barn doors that closed off the play area for the children and where all the toys are in that area. They did a beautiful job. I mean, it just really looks really good. And again, we're lucky to have the staff that we have that can do that. And we didn't have to hire that out by a carpenter to get that done. Our staff was able to do that. And then I'm on the library committee, and I gave each of you a little bookmark to set aside on your calendars for June 13th. There's going to be a Wisdom and Wine event, and they're bringing in 3 fabulous authors. And if you go to the wilmerwisdomandwine.eventbrite.com, you can sign up. And you can also pay to sit at one of the tables with one of these authors. But it's going to be a fun evening. Put that on your calendar, and you'll probably hear more about that as the months go on, because I've got 3 months to build this up. Okay, that's it for me.
I hope you're not talking about snow in June.
Me too.
Nothing for me this evening.
Councilmember Nelson.
Thank you. I brought with tonight, we had the Convention and Visitors Bureau meeting today, and so the 2019 guide to Candiai County is hot off the press, and so I brought some with to share with all of you tonight. I also brought Beth's Executive Director Report. It gets attached to our minutes, but you always get it a month late, so I thought I'd share it with you today and just let you know all the good things that are happening. We had a reminder again from one of the new county commissioners who was doing some homework about the fact that the tourism is our second largest industry. And so when you think of tourism, it brings lots of dollars into our community. And so I just wanted to share those with you tonight. So thank you.
Thank you. Under the mayor's comments, for those of you that are not aware, CCS, Community Christian School in Willmar, is building a golf putting area and a golf driving area. And it will be state-of-the-art. It will be the biggest one in the state of Minnesota. And this is something that not a lot of people are aware of. They were on open mic. For those of you that listen to open mic, Ryan Zimmer was on open mic and talked about it. And so if you haven't had a chance to get over there and take a look at that, I know they're going to have a chamber connection there in a couple weeks. But this is a amenity that the Christian school wants to bring to our community. There's a lot of people that travel great distances to go and play golf, particularly in the wintertime like this. You'll be able to pull up any golf course you want to play. In the putting greens, they actually have an actual, what do they call them, sand traps? To where you actually have to hit out of a sand trap there as well. So the nice thing about this is that the University of Minnesota golf area for the university in Minneapolis, we're putting in a similar type event down there. And the one in Willmar, that one is 200 square feet. The one in Willmar is 700 square feet. So it'll be the largest one in the state. And so people will be able to go out there and use it. They want to use it as a community resource. So those of you that have not had an opportunity to see that, that would be good to look at. The other thing is that I wanted to point out, which is good news for our community. I talked to the planning department today. Someone called and told me that they had heard that Kohl's was coming to Willmar. And so I can report that Kohl's has pulled a building permit from the city of Willmar. So that's good news for us. Hopefully that's starting to look for some exciting things happening at the mall. And, we're not at a point to where we're seeing the actual exterior work being done. My understanding is this would be for dividing the interior of the Kmart space, and that Kohl's would take part of that. So I know you all have been getting those questions for the last 8 months like I have, and so so that's very good news for our community. So in the light of bad things that we've been hearing at the mall, I am very excited about what's going to be happening at the mall here in the next 6 to 8 months. Some very exciting things are going to happen, and this is good news. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We are adjourned.